What's going on, guys? Chris Albert here with the Warrior Soul Podcast, and today I want to talk to you about purpose, finding your purpose. And it's an interesting question because there's a lot of people out there who don't think that they've found their purpose, who feel like they can't find a purpose, they can't find meaning in their lives. And the reason why I've been thinking about this a lot is because a few weeks ago I read a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I have to say that it's one of the most impactful books that I've ever read in my life. Everybody should read this book. Viktor Frankl was put into the Nazi concentration camps, and he survived there for 3 years. And during that time, he witnessed countless murders, the extremes of human suffering. He lived in filth, and he lived in absolute disgusting circumstances. And despite all of it, he survived. And the first part of the book, Man's Search for Meaning, describes his experiences in those camps. And Frankl was, before he went into the camps, he was a psychiatrist. And he studied psychoanalysis, and he was heavily influenced by Freud. And up to that point, Freud had outlined what was called the pleasure principle. The pleasure principle states that men, human beings in turn, human beings are driven to pleasure and driven by pleasure and the avoidance of pain. And the question that came up in Frankl's mind as he was going through the Nazi concentration camps, well, these were people who were living in the absence of pleasure and who were surrounded by pain. And yet, for some of them, their drive to live never left them, right? They did everything they could to survive. One of the things Frankl says in the book is, and speaking about those who were inmates in the concentration camps, he said, the best of us did not survive. And what that meant was that to survive the Nazi concentration camps, you couldn't be passive about it. You had to be very active, and it might have involved lying, cheating, stealing, doing things that would largely be considered amoral. And man, I couldn't imagine going through something like that. But what Frankl took from that was that, well, the pleasure principle was wrong, because a good portion of those who survived, well, they never had anything that would, according to Freud, have driven them to try to survive like they did. And Frankl goes on, and he talks about the fact that the whole concept that drove him the whole time was his family, thinking about his family, thinking about what life would be like after he got out. And eventually he returned to Vienna, only to find that his whole family had been murdered by the Nazis. And again, he's asking himself, well, what drives someone to live even though all this stuff has happened? And the answer he comes to is meaning, right? Meaning. He says that in order for people to survive harsh circumstances like that, they have to find meaning. And if somebody has meaning in their lives, well, that can allow them to survive even the extremes of the Nazi concentration camps, the extreme suffering, the extreme brutality. So what am I getting at here? Well, this morning I was reading this book, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And I came across this passage. It's at the top of book 4. And it says, that which rules within, when it is according to nature, will always adapt itself easily to that which is possible and presented to it. So when he says that which rules within, he's talking about like our spirit, right? For it requires no definite material in moving toward its purpose, but rather certain conditions. And it makes a material for itself out of that which opposes it. As a great fire lays hold of a mass that would have extinguished a tiny flame, when the fire is strong, it soon appropriates to itself the matter which is heaped on it and consumes it, rising higher by means of this very material. What is Aurelius saying? Well, he's talking about our spirits, and he's talking about how we approach life. So let's put it this way. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor, and is considered one of the great Stoic philosophers. And one of the bases of Stoicism is that you choose how you respond to things that happen to you in life. You choose how you respond to things that happen to you in life. And you don't get to choose what happens to you, but you choose how you perceive it, how you respond to it. And you can choose to allow anything that happens to you to make you stronger. And it's funny because they're thousands of years apart, but they come to the same conclusions, right? Frankl and Aurelius, right? Frankl's main conclusion was that you can choose whether or not to attach meaning to your life, right? And so for our modern times, I get asked all the time, how do I find greater meaning? How do I find greater purpose for what I'm doing? I get a lot of letters for the podcast about this. And the thing is this, it literally does come down to choice. You can choose either to look at the world around you and see a world of opportunity. When problems come in front of you, you can see them as opportunities to make you stronger, smarter, or better. Or you can choose to give up and allow those problems to break you. Or you can choose to retreat to comfort so that you never have to take those risks in the first place. And if you're currently in a place where you're feeling lost, my assumption would be that you're probably also in a place where you either haven't been tested or you haven't been tested in a while. You haven't tried to stretch yourself a little bit, to stretch your abilities. You see, a lot of us, we go through life not really searching for meaning, but we search for comfort, right? And one of the other things that Frankl says is that in the absence of meaning, we're going to search for a distraction, right? Now think about your life, right? And think about that analogy of the fire that Aurelius talks about, right? He says, when the fire is strong, it soon appropriates to itself the matter that is heaped on it and consumes it, rising higher by means of this very material. So the question I'm going to ask you is, what are you building your fire with? Are you building your fire with real tests of your intellect, of your strength? Or are you building your fire with distraction, right? What's your day like? How many times did you look at your phone today? And for what purpose did you look at your phone? Was it to actually accomplish something, or was it to turn your brain off? In your free time, how are you spending your time, right? Are you spending it trying to distract yourself with things like Netflix or ice cream or those types of things? Or are you actively trying to make yourself better? And if you're running into obstacles while you're actively trying to make yourself better, how are you responding to them? Are you allowing yourself to take a negative mindset from them? Or are you allowing yourself to get broken by it? To be increasingly negative because of those obstacles? Something to think about, guys. Because as we push forward in this life, if you want to accomplish anything that's truly meaningful, if you want to find a purpose that's going to bring meaning for your life, well, that's going to entail hardship. It's going to entail going through some obstacles, right? Frankl's life and his path, he didn't control that path, right? He couldn't control whether or not he was going to go to the camps, but he could control how he allowed that experience to affect him. And what I'd say to you is find a way to make the negative experiences in your life, because they're going to happen regardless. Find a way to make them meaningful. Find a way to use them to bring greater purpose and in turn meaning to your life. And if you can do that, you're going to live an awesome life. You're going to live an awesome life. Definitely check out that book, man, Search for Meaning. It'll get you thinking. It's had a profound impact on everybody that I've ever spoken to who's read it. And also, definitely check out the thoughts of Marcus Aurelius and Meditations. And if you want to hear more of me talking to people who are much smarter and more accomplished than I am, check out the Warrior Soul podcast on iTunes. I put this podcast out to empower U.S. military veterans to live their best lives. But if you're not a veteran, you can still listen to it. You're going to find just as much value in it as anybody else would. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope this wasn't too esoteric, and I hope that you got the message. So let me know if you did. Talk to you guys soon.